Hello everyone, my name is Preston Dennett, and today I'd like to talk about one of the most amazing UFO events I've ever investigated. This is a UFO event that occurred over a 4-hour period on the evening of June 14th, 1992, over Topanga Canyon, California. You may have heard of this event. I did write a book about this event and the sightings that followed. But I can guarantee you haven't heard the whole story because I just got some incredible new information about what occurred on that evening. I still have the police tape of people who called in to the police to report UFOs. I'll be playing portions of that throughout this presentation. And at the time I wrote the book, I knew of about 8 witnesses in 5 different locations who saw activity on that night. I now know of more than 25 witnesses in 11 different locations. So I've gotten a much clearer picture of one of the most amazing UFO events that I've ever investigated, certainly. So let's just dive right in. I became interested in UFOs in 1986 following a well-publicized sighting over Alaska. Started asking my family and friends and found out that a bunch of them had in fact seen UFOs. I joined MUFON, became a field investigator. I joined every group I could find. I bought all the magazines and books, started interviewing people formally, and wrote my first article on UFOs about sightings over Topanga Canyon. Turned out several people I knew had seen UFOs in this area. One lady, she was a good family friend, Sylvia Walters. She is a pilot, a scuba diver. She lived on Saddle Peak at the time, one of the higher points of Topanga, and described how she had seen this egg-shaped object with her friend. It made a low buzzing noise and just moved slowly over the house. That was one sighting. Another involved 2 young teenagers, 3, who were walking up Entrada Boulevard at night, this is in 1986, and saw 2 star-like objects approaching from different sides of the sky. The 2 star-like objects joined together, circled around each other, and went off in different directions. It's a very unusual sighting. A third sighting involved 4 teenagers who lived on Old Topanga Canyon. They were out on their deck one evening in February 1987 and saw first one very small, strangely shaped object swoop over the house, followed moments later by 2 more. A few minutes later, a very, very large object came very low over the house, maybe 50 feet, 100, and shined down a beam of light. It had little lights all around it. It was clearly strange. Made just a low whooshing or buzzing noise and moved off. This was followed by one more object. It was a veritable fleet of UFOs. And another case I investigated occurred in 1982 on Mulholland Highway at the north end of Topanga to a friend by the name of Mark Grant, who was with his friend one evening and just sitting on the hood of their car when they saw this triangular formation of lights. Each light was a different color. Suddenly it swooped towards them. The next thing they knew, it was swooping away. They had a very strong fear reaction. It's entirely possible they had missing time. So these were 4 early sightings that I wrote about in this article, and did not realize at the time that Topanga was a huge hotspot with a history of sightings, or that there was about to be a gigantic UFO wave of stupendous proportions. So how it all unraveled is in mid-June of 1992, I received a call from the editor of The Messenger, the local newspaper in Topanga Canyon, and he called to tell me that there had been a wave of sightings. A bunch of people called the police, 2 people called the office of The Messenger. These people were all reporting UFOs hovering over their homes, shooting across the sky, chasing their car down the street. One case, the car was actually lifted up off the ground in an apparent abduction. And Colin Penno wanted to know if I would investigate and see if I could find out some information about this case. He handed over the police tape. So yeah, I was all in, and I really buckled down and began investigating. I called the police. They confirmed the event but refused to release any information about it other than that they had received some calls. They took my number and promised to refer any new callers to me as a MUFON field investigator, which they did. After that, I started putting up flyers. I called everyone I knew in Topanga, asking them if they had seen anything on this evening of June 14th, 1992. There was a partial lunar eclipse that evening, so there should have been a lot of people outside. I was actually in Topanga on that evening. I had moved out about a year before to Canoga Park, but was visiting family and drove through the canyon around 9:30. I did not see anything. But what I found out was that there were a number of people who had seen stuff, and a bunch of calls paid off, and I found two other groups of witnesses rather, who had seen UFOs, and since then, as I mentioned earlier, a bunch of other witnesses. So I'll just start with how events occurred on that evening. Amazingly, this encounter apparently began early that morning. One couple I interviewed, they live high on Saddle Peak at one of the tallest points of elevation in Topanga Canyon, about 2,000 feet or so. And they described something very unusual that happened that morning. They were lying in bed, just about to get up, when they heard this low buzzing noise, like a transformer, over their home. It was very strange. It persisted for just a few minutes and suddenly went away, and they didn't think much more about it. The day passed normally. It was around sunset, dusk, when Catherine, as I call her, that's a pseudonym, looked outside and saw strange flashes of pink lightning, or what she thought was pink lightning. It was a warm, sunny day, no clouds in the sky, so it was very curious. And she didn't think much of it until she looked out again and saw this weird pink glowing bar of light sitting in the sky just above the ridge, sort of south and east of their home. Again, she didn't think much of it, just thought it was very peculiar, and they sat down and decided to watch a video. This was around 8 p.m. Their dog started barking shortly after they started the video, and they went outside to see what was wrong and saw this glowing object hovering above the ridge. Suddenly it blinked out and another object appeared. There were two objects now, and the first object suddenly zoomed towards them, moved right over their head. It lit everything up. It looked almost triangular shaped. They couldn't quite tell because it was moving so fast. And they watched another object rise up from behind this ridge, followed by another. And each time one object would rise up, the one above it would dart away. They saw about 10 objects maybe move off and dart in different directions. Sometimes turning at right angles, sometimes stopping and hovering briefly before moving in another direction. And they were just breathless. They couldn't believe it. It appeared to have stopped, so they went back inside. But about 10, maybe 15 minutes later, they saw more flashes of light, so they ran outside on their doorstep and watched a repeat performance. Maybe 5, 10 objects, 15 came up from behind this ridge, hovered briefly, and moved in various directions throughout Topanga Canyon. When it happened the third time, Catherine started to count these objects, and it would be 10 or 20 for each episode. And this went on for 2, maybe 3 hours. Every 10 or 15 minutes or so, another group of objects would rise up from behind the ridge. She thought it might be military, but David, also a pseudonym, Daniel, said there was no way it could be military. He's been in the military for years. We have nothing that can move like this. At one point, one of these objects did come very close to them, scared them pretty badly, but they saw this weird symbol on the bottom, which looked like a sine wave. They didn't hear any noise. It was frightening to see all these objects, one after another. Catherine became increasingly upset, and after about 2 or 3 hours of watching these things, she counted about 200 objects. I went up there to their house. They showed me where these objects were coming from. Daniel said, he's not sure if it was 200. It might have been closer to 100, which is still way too many. So clearly something very strange was going on. They were very badly upset. They called the police the next day. The police were oddly curious about what they had seen, but refused to divulge any information and would not tell them if anyone else had called in to report sightings. It was a couple years later, actually, that there was a lady in Malibu by the name of Judy who saw pretty much the same thing. You can see in this photograph here, numerous 10, 12 saucer-shaped objects. This is probably exactly what Catherine and Daniel saw coming up from behind the ridge. This was, again, 2 years later in Malibu, which is immediately adjacent to Topanga. And this photograph pretty much describes exactly what they saw. These small kind of oval-shaped objects rising up. That is one group of witnesses. Again, they live very high and have a really good overview of almost the entire canyon, but could not see where these objects were coming from because it was from behind a ridge, again, slightly south and to the east of their home. So I found another witness years later by the name of Mark. Mark was in the canyon on that evening, and it turned out he was in a location not too far from Catherine and Daniel, just a couple of miles away to the east and slightly to the south at a place called Moonfire Ranch at the end of Everding Road. This is high above Topanga Canyon Boulevard, just west of it. And he was there with a number of other people, a group of about 5 friends, when they noticed this bright light coming up from immediately behind a ridge to the west and slightly to the south. And as they watched, this area lit up and started to release small objects. It wasn't just 1 or 2, it was a number of them. And this went on for about 5 minutes as they watched these objects lighting up the ground like it was day, and completely freaked them out. There was, again, no sound. But if you correlate the sightings of Catherine and Daniel and Mark and his friends, it appears that these objects were coming up from somewhere below, certainly, in the area of Topanga Canyon Park on the south end of Topanga Canyon. And again, these were not the only witnesses. It was another early evening encounter occurred down at Venice Beach. A gentleman, I found out about his sighting and contacted him, and he described how he was down on Venice Beach when he, with a number of other people were there, when he heard the sound of an enormous quantity of water falling into the ocean. He twirled around and looked out in the ocean and saw that an enormous object had just come up out of the water. He didn't see it actually come up out of the water, but he could still see huge waterfalls of water, ocean water, coming off the surface and crashing back into the ocean. It was enormous, he said, the size of a stadium. There were several smaller, glowing, oval-shaped objects twirling around it, maybe a dozen. He saw this for only a few seconds because it immediately darted very quickly to the northwest, kind of going up the coastline. He said it was only 3 seconds that these objects were in view. So that's another amazing sighting on this night. Years later, I was actually doing a radio show when I was contacted by radio host Bill Boshears, and he told me he wanted to do a show because he was there on June 14th, 1992, driving through Topanga Canyon with a group of 2 other people. On their way back from a birthday party on that evening, they headed south through the canyon at around 10 p.m. They had no sooner reached the top of Topanga and were heading into the canyon itself. There's a long straightaway there when suddenly he saw a flash of light. He was driving. He pulled over and looked out, and he saw this object darting across the sky. He jumps out of the car, as did his other 2 friends, and saw this enormous sort of cigar-shaped or bar of light hovering at, he estimates, 3,000 feet above. It was extremely bright. It cast bright light down on the canyon itself, enough to cast shadows. Most amazing is it was ejecting groups of smaller objects, 5 or 10 at a time, which he described as kind of football-shaped, oval-shaped, glowing, and they would dart around and dart off, and then another group of objects would come out and start swirling around this cigar-shaped bar of light and take off. He and his friends watched this for about 20 minutes. There were other cars driving, he said, who apparently also saw this. And after about 20 minutes, his friends were becoming pretty upset. He thought at first there was a movie going on, but it was clear this wasn't a movie. He didn't know what it was. He could not identify it. And his friends were becoming upset and begged him to leave. And finally he said, okay, we'll go. It's something he regrets to this day, but he continued on driving. So one of the people who called the Topanga Canyon newspaper is Dr. Murray Clark. He lived in Sylvia Park on a little road off Cheney Drive. And he was outside that evening around 10, maybe 11 p.m. when he looked outside, he saw a star-like object darting at super high speeds across the sky. It was way too fast for a plane, but far too slow for a meteor. It traversed the entire horizon in about 3 seconds, perhaps. A pretty simple sighting, but taken in along with all these other sightings, we're starting to get a clearer picture of what's going on this evening. Another couple that I interviewed were not friends of mine, but friends of friends. I call them Philip and Mandy. They had gone to see friends up Entrada in the center of the canyon on that evening to view the lunar eclipse. And it was around midnight that they decided to leave, shortly before midnight. And no sooner did they turn off of Entrada and onto Topanga Canyon Boulevard, heading north, when they saw these objects. There was 4 or 5 approaching their car, not far away. Their first thought was perhaps they were helicopters and there was some sort of a drug bust. They quickly rejected this theory because the objects were completely silent and really brilliant, and actually followed their car for about 5 miles north all the way up through the canyon. Philip wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to them at this time, but Mandy was staring at them because she could not figure out what they were, and kept trying to say they were helicopters when it was clear that they weren't. And finally she says, "Look, Philip, I think those are flying saucers." At this point, they're heading along the straightaway where Bill Boshears was, where Bill Boshears and his friends had pulled over. And so they're driving along the same long straightaway. It's an eighth of a mile, a quarter mile. And they're looking to their left, and they see at least 3 of these objects now. They're clearly saucer-shaped. They have little lights all around them. They're below the level of the canyon. They appeared to have almost a height governor because they were sort of following the lay of the land. And Mandy's joke suddenly wasn't so funny because it was clear that these were classic flying saucers. And they drove a little slowly, did not stop, but continued driving up to the top of Topanga Canyon and down into the valley, at which point the objects stopped following them. So it was, probably around this time that the police were receiving calls. I'm pretty sure anyone who was outside that evening would have seen an enormous amount of activity. I'm sure there are other witnesses, but what I'd like to do is go through some of the accounts of the people who called the police. The first two calls came from two separate couples who had eaten at the same restaurant, it turns out, Gladstone's for Fish, which is located sort of in the Santa Monica area along the coast, and both of them headed north along the Pacific Coast Highway and then turned right and up into Topanga Canyon, probably very close to around the same time. Another call comes from a teacher who lives in the canyon, in the center of the canyon, and another call came from a man who was heading south. Oh, and there was another gentleman who also, or a rather lady, who lived in the center of the canyon near Sassafras, the Theatricum Botanicum, and she lives high on the ridge, and she called the Topanga Messenger the next day to say that she had seen incredibly bright beams of light shining down onto the boulevard. Colin Penno asked her if they could have been perhaps helicopters or headlights, and she emphatically said no. She's lived here a very long time and has never seen anything that bright or anything quite like that. So that's another witness. So I think probably the first one, not to call the police, but to have activity on that night, was the teacher who lived in the center of the canyon. They had gone to bed that evening and were woken up when the entire interior of their house lit up with bright light. They heard a low buzzing noise and saw this very large glowing object hovering over their home. And I will just play this segment of the police tape for you. It's about 5, maybe 6 minutes long. I had to edit out a little bit of identifying material, but this is pretty much the entirety of the call.
Topanga Canyon. Do you have, for lack of a better word, some helicopters or something flying up the canyon tonight that have unusually bright lights?
Not that I'm aware of.
I see. There's no aerial activity going on up there?
Not as far as we know. Why? What did you see?
Because about an hour ago, I live up in the canyon, and my wife and I were woken up. There was a very, very bright light coming above our home into the windows. And we went out to look at it, but we could see an extremely bright light hovering above us, but we couldn't hear anything.
Where in Topanga?
It's approximately, do you know what a sassafras nursery is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'd say a mile above that.
A mile north of it?
Yes.
Okay, did you hear anything or see anything besides the bright light?
No, we didn't hear anything, actually.
Okay.
What address where you live, sir? I don't really want to get involved with the police officer. It's strange. It's something that we should investigate, sir. What is your name? Excuse me 1 second. There weren't any helicopters flying out tonight? No, sir. But that's awfully strange. But it was nothing on the ground. Well, they usually aren't in the ground. They're usually in the air. Yes, but the damn thing didn't make any noise. If, in fact, this was truly a UFO. No. That's what I don't believe in such things. Well, I do. And if, in fact, it was, then
their technology is much farther along than ours. And yeah, I would think
is there any military? Because we're new here. We've just moved here about 3 months ago. Is there military in the area?
What's that?
Is there any military in the area?
Is there any what in the area?
Military. Is there an Air Force base near here?
No, sir.
Well, to tell you the truth, it was the strangest thing I've ever seen. The only sort of noise we did hear was a sort of a high-pitched hum.
Do you ever eat at Gladstone's?
No. Where is that?
Down on the beach.
No, I don't know the area so well. It really quite scared us. The light was very intense, and in fact it entered. It lit up the whole house inside.
Okay, well, we'd like to come up. We'd like to come up and investigate the area.
Well, my wife is a bit shaken up now. I'm going to calm her down. What? I don't really what.
Oh, you should let us come and talk to you.
I don't want to report the UFO officer because I don't want my name connected with.
No, you won't be connected with anything, but we need to investigate this. If there's somebody that's maybe doing something illegal, we need to find out. May not have anything to do with UFOs. Maybe somebody that's, some mad scientist or something up there is finding some kind of weird thing.
What is your name? Someone is doing something illegal. They have a hell of a lot of wattage because the light was intense. Has anyone else called?
No, sir.
You see, I don't want my name connected with the university.
No, your name isn't going to be involved at all, other than we just want to go up and know where you live so we can look around the area.
Well, it's gone now, and that's another thing.
Well, I know, but
as quickly as it came, that's how quick it went out. You know what? I'm going to discuss this with my wife, and I think, what is your address?
Our address here at the station?
Okay. When I go down Topanga Canyon Road and I hit Pacific Coast Highway,
where is it that you want to go, sir?
To your station.
Why?
I would like to go there tomorrow when we're a little bit more together and make some sort of report.
Well, once you sleep on it tonight, and then when you get up and you still want to do this, then call the station here.
Who would I speak with?
Anybody on the desk, sir.
Damnest thing I've ever seen in my life.
So yeah, an incredible sighting. Clearly this thing woke them up. These objects were targeting people. They were coming right over their homes and, as you'll see, chasing cars down the highway. The next call I want to talk about, the next person who called the police, is a man who is heading south through Topanga Canyon. He had driven along, came from the valley side, the San Fernando Valley, and was heading south through Topanga Canyon and had gotten to the part of the center of the canyon when he saw these objects chasing him down the road. Like Philip and Mandy, he thought at first they were helicopters. And I'll just play this segment where he describes what he saw to the Lost Hills police station. This segment is about 3 minutes long.
Is this the sheriff's office?
Yes, it is.
Can you all tell me, did you all have helicopters up in Topanga Canyon tonight?
We didn't. I don't know if the fire department or if LAPD did, but we did not.
Because, I was...
What did you see, sir?
About an hour ago, I was going down over Topanga Canyon, and I think they were helicopters because they were shining damn bright lights on me.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of chased me down the road a bit.
Where did you see them exactly, sir?
Let me think now. It was There's a theater called the Will Gear Botanical Theater. It's where old Topanga kind of meets new Topanga.
It's actually further north than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's above.
By the nursery?
Sassafras Nursery?
Yes.
Kind of close to there, yeah.
What did you see exactly?
I can't really tell you what I saw because it was so damn bright. But they were kind of chasing me down the way a bit.
How many of them?
One, I guess. But the only thing is, I think they were helicopters, but I sure couldn't hear any sound.
Well, I really don't know what to tell you, because like I said, we weren't up there, and if the fire department was up there, we would more than likely know about it. And LAPD has a small piece of Topanga, but it's further down towards the coast area, and they have just a very little piece of it.
Is there a bunch of helicopters that doesn't make any noise?
No.
Well, it sure did put off a powerful bright light. Very, very bright. And it was kind of like I'd see tailgate me from above. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything, actually, because it was so damn bright. Well, there's nothing going on. Nothing going on. But it sure was a strange thing to me.
Where were you coming from, sir?
I was coming from above.
From the valley side?
From the valley side. Oh well, no harm done. I didn't get hurt, but it seemed like I thought maybe there was some police activity there. Maybe they thought that they were following the people to get the license plates or something like that.
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
All right, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
So yeah, I mean, now we have what, 1, 2, 3 people driving along the boulevard who saw stuff around the same time on that evening. And I've got another segment of this police tape that I want to play for you. This comes from one of the couples who had eaten for Gladstones for fish. And after having dinner that evening, I'm estimating that they left around 10 o'clock. I don't know. It's a pure guesstimate. But I'm guessing they left around 10 p.m. or perhaps 11, and were heading up along the coast and turned right into Topanga Canyon. Topanga Canyon is a very rural area. It's a community of about 8,000 people, but it's one of the largest inner city state parks in the world. Griffith Park is around the same size. But it's a massive, sprawling wilderness area with some very inaccessible locations. So that might be a factor here. Hard to say. But the canyon does get very, very deep. It's got a little creek that runs all the way through it to the ocean. And so they headed north from the ocean up Topanga Canyon Boulevard. At this point, the canyon does get very deep, and it's probably in this exact area where they saw these objects following their car. They got out and observed them, and I'll just play the segment for you. This segment is about 3 minutes long. The quality is not great of this tape, but I think you'll be able to hear what they describe to the local police.
Is this the Malibu Sheriff's Office?
We cover Malibu, yes.
Do you also cover Topanga Canyon?
Yes, we do.
Well, this is going to sound very strange, officer.
Okay.
I'm almost embarrassed to discuss this over the telephone, except that my girlfriend was a witness. Did anyone call in and report anything strange happening in Topanga Canyon tonight around about an hour ago? Hour and a half.
No, they didn't. What happened?
Well, my girlfriend and I saw 3 very strange, Who does one report UFOs to?
The Air Force.
The Air Force?
Mm-hmm.
Well, either Gladstones and fish spiked our, put something in our wine, or we're hallucinating, because we saw something really weird tonight driving up the Topanga Canyon.
Okay, what did you see?
We saw 3 UFOs. Discs, flying discs, in the canyon.
Where were you in the canyon?
Real high up past Sassafras Nursery, where the canyon gets real deep.
What did they look like?
They were saucers. I mean, they were saucers. And then they were following us above our car.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden we stopped the car and we got out and we saw them. We watched them. And within, I'd say, 3 seconds, like a bat out of hell, they just went, poof, they were gone. They went straight up in the air.
Did they do anything?
No.
Other than just fly by?
No, they didn't do anything to us. They just flew by. And I was wondering if there was any, like, atmospheric disturbances tonight or any kind of water balloons or something.
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Well, we thought maybe there's a possibility they were helicopters, except they didn't make any noise.
Uh-huh.
Well, I know my girlfriend and I, we both watched it. We just got home. Now, I mean, I don't live in Malibu. But I was just very curious as to find out if anyone else had reported something.
No, sir.
Well, maybe it's, like I said, maybe Gladstone spiked our wine. So it's the Air Force you report these things to?
Yes.
So you wouldn't happen to have their number, would you?
No,
They'll probably just think we're nuts anyhow. Well, I guess there's nothing much more that can be said. I'd be interested in knowing if anyone else saw anything.
No, nobody called us.
Well, I don't know. We saw what we saw, so I guess maybe we had too much wine. All right, thanks. Sorry to keep.
That's okay. All righty.
So yeah, they saw 3 saucers. They were clearly upset about it and didn't know what to think, but recognized that these were not normal objects, UFOs. And like the other callers, we're very interested to see if anyone else had seen something. Not sure why the police denied it, but more on that later. There is one other group of witnesses I'd like to talk about now, and that's the other couple who also ate at Gladstone's for fish that evening. It's a remarkable coincidence. I'm guessing they were pretty close to this other couple in terms of proximity and time, but they did not know each other and had decided to go up the coast after eating at Gladstone's for fish and decided they were going to drive through Topanga Canyon. I think it's probably a decision that they regret for the rest of their lives, because they ended up having one of the most terrifying experiences of their life when one of these objects followed their car down the highway, struck them with a beam of light, lifted them up into the sky, set them back down a short time later, and they got home, they say, by the grace of God. Now I want to play this 5-minute segment from the police tape. This segment is of terrible quality. I apologize for that, but if you persist, it gets a little bit better. And it's just 4 or 5 minutes long. And they describe exactly what they saw on that evening to the Lost Hills police.
Anyone report anything strange tonight?
It seems to be a little bit more specific. Strange
lights.
Light? Not that I know of. I believe you're the first.
We are almost ashamed to tell you what we saw. We did not drink tonight. We don't take drugs.
Okay.
My girlfriend and I have no history of psychotic problems or hallucinations.
Okay.
And I think we're going to go see a psychiatrist tomorrow. We're going to an emergency room after she calms down.
What exactly happened to you on your
I'm
way
ashamed to tell you because I think you're going to think I'm crazy. We don't know who to tell.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell me, and maybe I can advise you as to proper people to talk to.
Officer,
If you want to.
we were up at Topanga Canyon where there's a deep canyon. You know where the canyon gets really deep? And we saw what we thought was a bright light up in the sky.
Okay.
And we had a very uneasy feeling because it was moving and we both felt it was following us.
Oh, okay.
All of a sudden, on top of us was this extremely bright object that we could hear. It wasn't a helicopter. It made a high-pitched sound. And we lost control of our car.
Okay.
And it lifted us up in the sky. It lifted us up off the ground. Now, I'm telling you, I have never been more frightened in my life.
Okay, what happened then?
We were put down. We lost our memory for I don't know how long, maybe a couple minutes. And it wasn't there anymore.
Okay.
I don't believe in these things. I'm telling you, I'm a normal human being. I have a job, a good job. My girlfriend has a good job. She's a nurse.
Okay, are both of you okay? Is the car okay, or?
The car is all right. We feel we are very disorientated. We got home by the grace of God.
Okay.
My girlfriend was near hysterical. And I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to go to someone, to an official, to report this because they're going to say that we're out of our minds. And we're not drinking. We don't take any drugs at all. We're just normal people.
Well, I really don't believe that something like this would fall under our jurisdiction. What I can advise is,
Should I report this to anyone or should I just rack it up as just, I don't know what to even think.
well, it's hard to say, you know. You like to go visit a doctor or something like that.
We are very nauseous. We're very nauseous. And we feel very weak and disorientated now.
Well, I think you should probably go see a medical doctor, and if you want some type of psychiatric help, that may help you and your girlfriend too. We have to do anything like that. I don't know
Do you think something like this was real?
Well, I've never seen anything like what you described it as. I can't say it this way.
Nothing like this has ever happened to any of us.
So yeah, you can see how upset they were from this call. What's amazing, and this is the new information I got, is they called the National UFO Reporting Center the next day. I did not know this. I just recently got a hold of this interview in the New Fork archives online, And it's an incredible interview. It's about 10 minutes long, and the husband describes in detail exactly what happened on that evening. It's a lot more than he initially revealed in some ways. They did have physiological effects. They received burns, like a sunburn, blisters, and lasting, I think, psychological effects. So I'll just play this incredible interview from New Fork for you. Again, it's about 10 minutes long.
UFO Reporting Center?
Calling from Los Angeles.
Yes.
I've got to make this fairly short because I've got to get back to my doctor's at 2:30. The FAA and the Air Force gave me this number,
Yes.
and I'd like to report something that happened to my girlfriend and I last night, Topanga Canyon.
Okay, would you describe it, please?
And by the way, we called the Malibu police, and they said that 3 other people had reported similar things. It's just nothing that we're imagining.
Okay.
We were driving up Coast Highway, number 1, Pacific Coast Highway. Are you familiar with that area?
Yes, I am.
And we backtracked and decided to go up to Topanga Canyon Road, which is it goes pretty high up into the canyon country. Do you know where Topanga Canyon is?
Yes.
Okay.
Very familiar with it.
All right. There's a place where old Topanga Canyon goes to new Topanga Canyon, and there's a real high ledge that goes deep, deep down. You can overlook the canyon.
Okay.
At any rate, this gets weirder as it goes on. Out of nowhere appeared over our car a brilliant light that was hovering about, I'd say, 50 feet on top of our car.
Okay.
And at first we thought it was a helicopter, a police helicopter or something, except that we realized that we didn't hear any sound. And we looked up and we could see clearly the defined shape of a pie-shaped object, a saucer. I mean, I hate to use that term.
Okay.
A saucer-type object. There was a rim. We could see a rim, and then within the rim was this just one big, brilliant light that kept shining on our car.
Okay. Was this like a beam of light?
Yes.
Okay. Was that in the form of a beam or a cone?
It was a wide cone.
Okay.
A wide cone.
Okay.
Covered, I'd say a good, maybe 50 feet in diameter.
Okay.
But it was very, very bright. At any rate, we turned the car around and we decided to go back down the canyon, and this damn thing kept following us. It kept, at the speed we were going, at the same speed we were going, it was following us. It was above our car about 50 feet, I'd say. And we kept looking up, and it was there, and if we would go faster, it would go faster. If we would slow down, it would slow down. And we had the distinct impression that it was pursuing us. The only noise that I felt that we could hear was the sound that a transformer would make, like a hum,
All right.
a high-pitched hum.
Okay.
Then I told my girlfriend, we better get out of here. So I accelerated the car, but you got to be very careful on Topanga Canyon because it's a very windy road. And when I tried to accelerate the car, my engine went out. The lights went out. Everything went out.
Okay.
And we got out of the car thinking that we were going to run away. I'm telling you, my girlfriend was almost to the state of hysteria. In fact, later on, we went to Cedars-Sinai emergency room when I got home, when we got to our home here. When we got out of the car, we got even a better look at it. We saw that it was not a helicopter. And within, I'd say, seconds, it just went straight up in the air, and as quickly as it appeared, that's how quickly it vanished.
Okay.
At any rate, we got back into the car, and got down to the coast highway. We came home to Los Angeles, and my girlfriend was very, very badly shaken up. She's a nurse. I'm an accountant. We went to Cedars-Sinai emergency room, and we had broken out in blisters on the backs of our hands. My girlfriend, where she was wearing a necklace, you could see the mark where the necklace was. I wear glasses. You could see on my face the glass mark. And we have very nauseous all night and diarrhea.
Okay, now was that like a bad sunburn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's like a bad sunburn, but it's weepy. They're weeping blisters.
Okay.
And I sure didn't have it. We didn't have this when we went out. At any rate, we did call the Malibu police when we got home, and they said that 3 other people had called concerning similar incidents that evening.
In the same area?
In the same area, the Topanga Canyon area.
Okay.
There was an officer. And we're going to go back to the doctors today at 2:30, so I can't stay too long, and I don't want to get terribly involved with even the doctor said I could report this. I'm not prone to these far out situations, sir, but it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. It was really quite frightening.
Okay. Now, was your girlfriend an RN?
Yes, she's a registered nurse.
Now, what time did that occur?
It occurred, I would say, approximately at 12:30 in the evening.
That's this morning?
Yes. My girlfriend works.
Now, do you have any estimate of the diameter of the object?
It was about 50 feet in diameter.
Okay. Now, do you remember the color of that cone of light?
White.
Okay.
White with, but there was some blue in it, blue around the edges.
Okay, now when you were exposed to that beam of light, did you detect any change of temperature?
No, but our skin tingled.
Okay.
And it felt like there was a little, I don't know, electrical feeling in your skin.
Okay.
And then for a brief moment, to tell you the truth, neither of us even could remember what happened. It was almost as if we had blacked out.
Did you feel that was a very short duration?
I think so. I have no way of knowing.
Okay. Did you detect any unusual odors at the time?
Come to think of it, yeah. I would say like burnt cinnamon.
Okay. Did you have any trouble restarting your car?
At that point, to tell you the truth, I can't remember.
Okay.
I don't know. I think maybe a couple clicks and it started. I can't remember.
Okay. Have you seen any other problems with the car since you got home?
No.
Okay. Now, were there any other unusual physical traces with you or your lady friend?
No.
Okay. And how long do you feel this entire incident went on?
I feel that it followed us for about 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then out of the car, maybe a minute or so. But it was when we were out of the car is when I kind of lost track of what was going on for a while.
Okay.
Do other people report things like this?
Well, yes, sir, they sure have. They've been reporting them for years. Now, what was the name of the doctor you were going to?
Well, we went to the Cedars-Sinai emergency room, and I don't recall the name of the doctor.
Okay.
Because of my job, I really don't want to get
I understand.
terribly visible, because when you talk about this to people, we are going to go see a psychiatrist. We weren't hallucinating. I didn't make this rash up.
Yes. Okay, could I get your name?
Sir, I don't want to give my name.
Okay. Is there any way we can get back to you if we need more information?
Well, what more information would you need? I'm going to go back to the doctors. I can't call you back. It's just my wife, my girlfriend has a governmental job. And
Right.
you got to understand, this is of such high strangeness that people tend, if it gets out, they tend to look at you as if you're weird or something.
I understand. Okay, what we would like to do after you visit your doctor, if you feel like it, we'd like to hear what his diagnosis of the injuries is.
And what do they do with all this data?
What do we do with it? Well, we compare it with other similar cases over the past years, which gives us a basis for determining the reality of what is going on.
Is this something that the government is doing?
No. This type of incident has occurred off and on throughout the United States and overseas for the last 40 years.
I've read about things like this, but reading it is one thing, but when you see it firsthand, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it.
It can be very traumatic.
And other people do call you.
Oh, yes, we're averaging about 6 calls or 6 reports a day right now, and that's very, very quiet. We cover all of North America.
Well, what is this thought to be?
Well, there's, of course, 3 or 4 different theories. My own personal opinion is that these are objects coming in from outer space. And I've been studying the subject for 36 years.
Jesus Christ. So you don't think this was...
So there you go. I mean, you can see that whatever occurred on that evening, it was stupendous. Over 24 witnesses, more than 10 different locations throughout Topanga Canyon, spaced no more than 10-20 miles from each other, all saw stuff on this night. Some were lucky, they just saw, UFOs hovering over their home or rising up from behind the ridge. At least 4 or 5 people claimed that they were chased down the highway, and yes, apparently there was one abduction. The sightings did not stop here. It was very strong for the next 2 years. There were more car chases, some landings, a few abductions. One guy saw a UFO drop out of the sky, came right back up, wondering if that was an abduction where they picked someone up. Way too many sightings to go into here. That'll have to be another presentation, because I just wanted to focus on the incredible events of June 14th, 1992. I will say that there have been many photographs taken of UFOs, as you've seen, and I had my own sightings on at least 5-10 different locations, almost always really, of anomalous lights that I certainly could not explain. Sometimes I was alone during these sightings, but most I was with other people who oohed and awed when they saw this stuff too. So it was an extremely active time in this area, Topanga Canyon, and has since slowed down a little bit, but is still having incredible activity. That's it. If anyone has any information about what occurred on June 14th, 1992, I would certainly love to hear it. But until then, thanks for listening and keep having fun.